Hi, I'm Rick Crow, and this is Short Track Stories. All right, we're back with another episode of Short Track Stories, and tonight, special guest. Looks like he's coming from the North Pole. My good buddy, Greg Benner. Where are you at, Benner?
Actually, I'm not at the North Pole. I am in central Chino, California. So nice and warm here, a lot warmer than the North Pole.
Is that the prison, or you have a house there?
We're just down the street from the prison. But
are you really?
Oh yeah, we're about a mile and a half from Men's State Penitentiary there.
Yeah, that's a federal pin.
Yes, it is.
I bet you. I could tell you a couple of guys that have been there that you would be surprised. Guys
we better not
race
do
with.
That on podcast.
No, we won't do it on a podcast. So listen. I mean, we've taken some trips together, and in the last 3 years, 4 years, we take one trip every year or whatever. And what I've learned is that you're really kind of a student of the sport, not just a racer, but and not just a fan, but I mean, you're a student of the sport of NASCAR.
I am. Not only am I a fan, as you said, but there's certain drivers that I have followed throughout the years that have really piqued my interest, and therefore I have read about them, followed them, and learned as much about the drivers that I was a fan of to know where they came from and their history. I find it very interesting.
So, and you talk a lot more intelligent than a lot of the race car drivers that we know. And so, what did you do for a living, Greg? You always had Benner floor and wall in your car. Were you a floor and wall guy, or?
I did. That came from, on my early race cars, the fact that I worked with my dad, who installed floor covering. And when he was building a house in Downey, he actually set aside a plot of land right behind the house where he actually built a garage where I could keep my first race car. And he could have doubled his rental income had he chose to build two houses, but he was generous enough to build a garage so I would have a place to keep my first race car. And I felt that warranted having his name on the race car. But that was a part-time gig. I worked with my dad on the weekends, and I've been a middle school teacher for 37 years, now retired.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Whittier, right?
I did. Actually born in Montebello, California, and moved to Whittier when I was 10, lived there for 50 years. And 9 years ago, my lovely wife, Kim, and I bought a house here in Chino, and we've been here for the past 9 years.
So you grew up kind of, I don't know how old you are doing the math or whatever, but so you grew up, Ontario was still open, Riverside was open, Speedway 605 was open, and that was all probably within what, a half hour of your house?
Speedway 605 was 20 minutes up the 605 freeway. Ontario Motor Speedway was probably, I'd say, under an hour, and Riverside about the same, maybe a little over an hour. Actually, I was at Ontario Motor Speedway's very first race, the California 500 in 1970, and I was at Ontario Motor Speedway's very last race in 1981. So I got everything in between, not just NASCAR, but IndyCar. I actually saw some drag racing there. I think they called it Super Nationals at the time, and some road racing events there as well.
Wow, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So where did it all start? Is that where it started, or where did your passion for racing and where did you dip your toe in the water?
Well, my passion for racing started quite a bit earlier than that, before I even had a driver's license. My dad actually had stock in Union 76, and as a promotion, they sent free tickets to him, and we went to a race in Riverside Raceway. It was called the Permatex 300. And I was probably 12, 13, somewhere around there. and I absolutely fell in love with Herschel McGriff's 1957 Chevy. It was beautiful, and he won the Saturday race, and that was the very first race that I saw, actually Riverside. And then from there, realizing how much I really enjoyed the stock car racing, then we started going to Speedway 605 later on, since it was just up the road from Whittier.
So you said that was like 1970.
Oh, no. It was, well, yeah, at Riverside. Yes, that's correct. Speedway 605. We didn't start going there until 73, 72, 73, somewhere around there. And sat in the stands, was a huge fan of their Ivan the Terrible Baldwin. Oh my gosh, the cars that he turned out. Again, he had a 57 Chevy there. It's called the CB Glass Mirror Flash. One of the first race cars I saw with Mylar numbers, and it really stood out under the lights, under a short track lighting system.
So those were just starting to come into play in the early 70s. And at some point, NASCAR didn't like them at all. As far as I remember, they didn't like the Milo or the Prism.
Yeah, it was something about the reflection from photography, flash photography and things of that sort. They didn't show up in programs. They didn't go well for sponsorship and things of that sort. So they actually banned them for a while. And watching races now, I see that they've allowed them back on. I see the DeWalt car, the 20 car, has Mylar numbers on some of their presentations in the NASCAR races.
On a side note, so we're going to skip around a little bit here. It surprises me how many NASCAR teams still cannot get their schemes right. I mean, they just sometimes that DeWalt car looks terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just some cars I don't understand. I mean, they don't know Mike Johannes or Ed Horst. You know, Johannes used to say, because sometimes I'd be like, dude, those are big. And he'd be like, they look big here, you know, but when you get on the track, you really can't have. So he had that art of knowing that I'm going to take up your whole door and it may look big in your garage. But
yeah,
but some of the NASCAR cars, I'm not a big fan of all the scallops and everything. I'm more of a clean look, but still some of their numbers are just, the DeWalt car specifically, sometimes it looks terrible.
Yeah, I think one of the key things there is contrast, seeing contrast, whether you're in person, on TV, in print. If you have something with good contrast, it's going to show up well, I believe. My wife, Kim, also, she's also a NASCAR fan, has been for years and years, and is kind of disappointed in the fact that, you know, it used to be when you watch a race, you knew Tony Stewart was in the Home Depot car, or you knew Tony Stewart was in the Old Spice car. You knew that. And it was that way from Daytona to, you know, Homestead, Miami, or wherever. But now, and I realize budgets have increased tremendously, and so they have to get the money where they can. But when, you know, the 24 car, which used to be, you know, DuPont, is now another sponsor, and then 3 races in, it's another sponsor. It's a little tough to follow. I mean, I know who they are, but the average fan, I think, could easily get lost. And I think NASCAR's kind of hurting in that respect, but I realize they do have to pay the bills.
Yeah, and it's sometimes, especially if their number doesn't stay consistent, even like the font or the color of their number. So, so Speedway 605, is that where you dipped your toe in the water? I mean, how long did you race there? Did you?
I did. I watched races there, and in 1976, which you guys can do the math. It shows how long I've been around. Bought my first race car, and since it was $650, I couldn't afford that, so I went in halvers with a friend, and so we each put in half the money for a $650 car. It was a 1963 Chevy Impala. Probably weighed more than the truck we towed it with. And of course, being the planner that I am, we bought the race car and realized, well, we don't have a trailer, we don't have a truck to tow it with, and we have no place to park it. So let's work those things out now. That's after we bought our race car.
Right.
But yeah, we bought the car and towed it to Speedway 605 and raced it. And My very first race there, I finished 16th. And I don't know if this will show up on camera or not, but I kept my first prize money. This is $10, finished in 16th place, Speedway
That's awesome.
605.
That's my career earnings right there.
And that race was kind of eventful for me anyway. Obviously, I was very nervous, but I ended up in the wall, went yellow. They towed me in. The right front tire went flat, towed me in. And as they towed me in, I had 3 friends with me. And I said, put another tire on. And they said, we don't have another tire. And I said, well, try the van. The van that was towed us there had a Chevy wheel on it. Jacked it up. It fit. Put the right front from the spare on the van on the race car. I went back out. I actually took the checkered flag in my last race, or first race, excuse me, and finished 16th. And that's where it started in July of 1976.
Racing was just so simple back then, right?
Oh, it was. And that car, the reason it got a flat tire is because when we bought the car, the guy who cut the fenders out did it with a torch. And it looked like shark's teeth all the way around. So it was an accident waiting to happen.
Speaking of fast tire changes, were you part of that Leland crew with me and Cromside at Mesa Marin?
I was there, but I was not part of the crew. And my understanding was that it was your first hot pit session. Yeah. Is that true?
Well, I had done some fuel for Hornaday, but it was our first.
Oh, you had?
It was our first, grab the air impact and go over the wall.
Okay,
stuff.
Now I know you're the host of this, but refresh my memory on that. How'd that go down?
So he came in with a flat tire. He was in his closed time car, super late model. And I think then it must've been Rourke, like maybe me, Cromside and Rourke. And we jumped over the wall and changed his right front tire, like Days of Thunder shit. And we're like, go. And he takes off down pit road and the front right tire is just going, it wasn't spinning or anything. Right. And, Mesa Marin's a freaking half mile. And so we're like, what's wrong? He goes all the way around, comes back in, and we realized that we put like the left rear on the right front or something. So the offset was stuck on the caliper. So we jump over the wall again. It was just locked up when you were So we jumped over the wall again, swapped it out, and he took off. And at the end of the night, Lee came in and we were like, we're sorry. And he had the biggest smile on his face. And he's like, that's the funniest shit I've ever seen in that just made my whole night. He always had a good attitude anyway. But
that's the ultimate flat spotting of a tire.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to hijack your story. So I know because I had some pictures. I bought a binder of pictures at a swap meet that had a bunch of old drivers and stuff in it. And I just knew it was Saugus and some Riverside in Ontario. I didn't know who they were. And I remember I asked you and you knew the guy. Was that before you started racing with him or after? Remember it was like an orange that like a Charger or something. He lived down the street from you, or Kevin Terrace or
Kevin Terrace.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, actually that driver, his name's Kevin Terrace. And we actually met him again. This is before I even had a driver's license. My neighbor was taking us to Riverside. And on our way home from a cup race at Riverside, because they ran actually the first race and the last race back in the 70s was at Riverside International Raceway. Daytona came after Riverside. They started in January. And on our way home, we stopped at a gas station, and there was a ramp truck with a 1970 Roadrunner sitting on the ramp truck that had been in the race. And number 32, beautiful car. And so we were oohing and on over it and everything. And my buddy and I saw Kevin come out. We didn't know him at the time. We asked for his autograph, and he gave it to us, very cordial, very friendly. And that's actually sparked a relationship that grew as time went on. We asked where he lived, and he lived in Torrance, California. And we asked if we could ever come down to his shop to see his car. And so he was he was a Winston West driver. He ran with drivers like Ray Elder, Jack McCoy, Sonny Easley, that era.
Yep.
And was very successful on the West Coast. But at the time, Winston West blended in with the Cup cars at Riverside. So they ran together.
That's
and,
some Insolo, like the True Cheek and the Insolo type stories and that type where they were running with those guys. That's cool.
Exactly. And so I was 15 when we met him, and we would go down to Torrance and actually work on his car a little bit. And probably the neatest thing that I did with Kevin is he asked me one time, he says, "Are you interested in building a new race car?" And I said, "Yeah." And at the time, they were pulling street cars off the assembly line to make into race cars. Plymouth gave him a brand new 1972 Roadrunner.
Wow.
And brought it to his shop, basically a plain Jane car. And he said, "Bring your buddy down." And he says, "We'll go to work." And so Mark and I went down to Torrance, and we spent a couple of days stripping this car, taking seats out, headlights, all of that stuff. And the car still had leaf springs. I mean, I remember taking the car to Ontario Motor Speedway. Its debut was at Ontario in 1972. And it was leaf springs in the back, coil springs in the front. But it was a beautiful piece. Kevin always turned out nice cars. And that was a great relationship I had with Kevin. I actually got to work in the pits. I wasn't over the wall like you, but I got to work on the car at the track, and which was a very exciting time for me at that, for a 16, 17-year-old kid.
So that was even before you got your street stock for Speedway 605.
Correct. It was. That was in 1972, 73. And at Speedway 605, we raced there in 1976 and 77. And the track closed. Speedway 605 actually closed in 1978, the next year after. Early on, it was called San Gabriel Valley Speedway, and they'd run Orange Show Speedway Friday nights and San Gabriel Valley Speedway on Saturday nights. So there was 2 consecutive nights for short tracks, and 605 or San Gabriel Valley Speedway at the time was a half mile, and Orange Show was quarter mile.
What did you like in that half mile too? Like a Kern County, a Mesa, or not? Neither. Like what was it? What was was it paperclip? Was it D shaped? I mean, what was the closest track we raced at today? That
it was not nearly as high banked as Mesa Marin. It was, and of course Saugus is flat as pancakes, so it was more banked than that. I would estimate 605 was banked at about probably a little more than Irwindale is. And I think Irwindale is like a 12. And so I would say it was between a 15, 18 degree bank.
So pretty solid, pretty good speed.
For me, it was a real attention getter. Our first year, we actually ran on there was I believe it was a quarter mile inside, shared the same front straightaway. And we ran the short track inside. And then we would run the half mile in 77. Is if we moved up to the half mile, we ran it was called limited stock was a division that we were in.
What'd you like better?
I like the short track better.
Did you really? Because in my opinion, you've always been better on the big track.
Because there was more door to door. You were always with somebody. On the half mile, they had good fields. They'd be 20 cars, something like that. But on the quarter mile, you were always racing somebody, and I loved that. That's why I ended up going stock cars versus anything else. I have a friend who actually had a Formula Ford open wheel car and allowed me to drive it one time, and I liked it. Wasn't real good, but I liked it. But I always felt with the stock cars and the fenders and stuff, you get more action. So I kind of gravitated towards the shorter tracks.
And who were the big guns at 605 back then?
Oh, Ron Esau.
Hold on, stop right there, because I was looking at something the other day, and there were 3 Esau's in one race.
Ron Esau, Larry Esau, and George Esau. And I believe George was the father, and Ron and Larry were the sons. and they
Interesting.
did all three run there at the same time. They were the ones to beat. They were terrific. But in my estimation, as I said before, Ivan Baldwin was right up there at the top. Beautifully turned out cars, an aggressive driver, yet a clean driver. He would. I kind of, at the time, I couldn't really appreciate it as much as I did when I got to Saugus. But at Saugus Speedway, I always felt that the master of the bump and run was Dave Blankenship. Guys like him, Horst, they could get around people without taking them out, not just plowing through them, but come up and, nudge coming up off the corner and then be underneath them by the time they got down the straightaway. I always thought Dave Blankenship was the best at that.
You didn't think I was good at a bump and run?
The bump, yes. The run, I don't know.
Come on, Benner. Now you can't take a shot like that. Now we're going to jump around again a little bit more.
That's fine with me.
But
I know where we're going.
I have a picture somewhere around here where I was lapping you in pro stocks or something, and you were trying to block me, and I dumped you. Tell that story, because you tell the story better than I do.
Okay, well, it was Trophy Dash.
Oh, Trophy Dash.
Trophy Dash, yes. And I had gotten out of the lead. It was you, me, Terry Custer, and John Kirby. And I had gotten out in the lead, and 4 laps, 4 fast cars, and I had never won a dash. And I remember going down the back straightaway, going into 3. Here's a mistake that I made that I'll never, ever forget. Don't ever think you got it won until you go across start finish line. And I went in thinking, I got this. And as I got turned around, I realized I didn't. But I'm here in front of you, Rick Crow, and everybody else to tell you that when I went into 3 and I was thinking, I got this, I might have been a little on the defensive side. And I don't think that was the way to go. I should have driven the last lap as hard as I drove the first lap. And so all these years you've been thinking, man, I was the bad guy and stuff like that. I will tell you that I should have driven it just as hard that lap as I did the others. I didn't, and it cost me. And
no, I think Custer hit me.
Custer was in 3rd, and he ended up walking away with a trophy.
So what really happened? I dumped you, right? I dumped you going into 3 on the checkered flag lap, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember how good of friends we were then, if we were really good friends or just acquaintances, or we were really good. I honestly don't remember. But so you didn't win. I dumped you.
Yes.
Were you pissed?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Garrett Cromsite and I met Henry Miles in the pits at Orange Show a couple of years ago, and we were talking. And Henry said, Benner's usually a pretty easygoing guy, but I have never, ever seen him as pissed off as he was that night.
Is he talking about you or Kim?
Huh?
Is he talking about you or Kim?
Oh, me. And I came around, I smacked you in the back, bumper going off to show you my displeasure. And then in the pits, I came out after you thinking I'm this badass driver and I'm going to go, show this guy, how pissed I am. And we were friends, but not as close as we are now. And I realized at that time, when you had about 5 inches of height on me and about 50 pounds of weight on me, I thought, okay, this is probably not a fight I want to get my dog into. And, but the reason I was so upset is I had sponsors there that night. I had my family there that night. I'd never won a career trophy dash, ever, ever, ever. And I could see that was going to be my first one. And it took me a year. It was 93 before I won my first dash. But it was a disappointment.
You
but I also
probably won
learned
more dashes than I have now. So I kind of remember you coming over and yelling at me in my pit. I don't know if we were pit close to each other.
We were pretty close to one another. We were. That's when
side of the fence,
right there. Fence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you let me rant and rave for a little bit, and then finally you took me by the driver's suit and put me up against the hood of my car and said, "Okay, that's enough." And I realized I had got it out of my system. All right, we're done.
Did you bring me cookies?
Huh?
Did you bring me cookies after that?
Oh, that didn't come that night.
Oh, dang.
Kim's Racing Cookies, famous on so many race cars, on Rip Michael's car, your car, Garrett's car, so many cars. And where that, and again, I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
And where that came from is the fact that Kim used to, and still does actually, make terrific cookies, and she'd bring them to the races. And I think Kim remembers Rip the most, because he'd come over and say, "Can I have a cookie?" Yep. And he'd grab a stack about 8 of them like this and walk away.
Yeah.
And so she started making more and more. And eventually she said, "You know what? I'll make it for whichever car, whichever team wants them. But you put Kim's Racing Cookies on the car and you got it." And her name was on a good half dozen 8 cars out there at Saga Speedway. And that transferred on into when we raced at Willow Springs and even Irwindale.
Yeah. I wonder how many cookies she was making at Saugus to go to the track. A lot.
It started out with a small box, and she was walking out when we were heading for the track with buckets like this big.
and Rip was I don't know if he wasn't an iron worker then. I just know he was so hooked on racing. He was always working on his race car.
Yeah.
But he used to come to my apartment for dinner, and it's like he just kind of roved around and got food from people and stuff, and we talked racing. And I remember one night he came to my apartment and I fed him dinner, and then he went to leave and he came back in. He goes, "My truck's gone." And I'm like, "Where did you park it?" And he goes, "Over there." And I'm like, "Dude, that's a red zone, man." And they towed his truck. Why?
They towed his truck?
Yeah, they towed his truck. So
it's kind of neat. If you don't mind, just 2 weeks ago, we were at Havasu 95 Speedway. I was spotting for Jim Vermillion, and Rip was there. He was working with Woodside. Sean Woodside. There was a late model race there. And Rip, I hadn't seen Rip in several years. And he walked up, and the neat thing about the friendships that are forged at the racetrack is that they're solid and they're long lasting. Mm-hmm. Rip walked up, he saw me, there, and we talked for an hour like we'd seen each other last week. And I hadn't seen him in 3-4 years. And the friendships that we've made at the racetrack are probably one of the best things that I've got out of racing, is the relationships and the friendships that we've made, and the memories. I mean, there are so many memories from Saugus, Mesa Marin, 605. Well, not 605 so much, but the racetracks since the mid 80s that are still around and still last.
Yeah. Rip was like Cromside. Don't talk to him at the track because they won't talk to you, but you get them off. And so back to 605, I remember we a couple of years back, I invited you up into McGee's suite at Irwindale, and Joe Nava was in there, and I remember you and Nava talking all night long about 605. Did he race there too?
He did, yes. And I didn't know him personally. I knew of him at the time. But yeah, we sat in the suite. I think we were watching a West race there at Irwindale, and he had one of his cars in the race, and we got to talking about 605, and I actually told him, we got to talking about those days, and I said, when the racetrack closed, I actually I called the city of Irwindale, the city manager or something like that, and the track sat vacant for probably 2-3 years. It was still there, but the grandstands were gone. And I got it in my mind that I wanted the sign that said Speedway 605. And so I called, and he said, "My name's, Bob Johnson," or whatever. And he says, "If anybody says anything, you give him my number." And he gave me his phone number. Well, one day my dad and I were coming home from a linoleum job in Azusa, and we stopped at 605, and I had an extension ladder. We put the extension ladder in the bed of the truck, put it all the way up to the sign. And I realized that, from the freeway, it just, no big deal, Speedway 605. I get up there, the numbers, I can't even hold my hands out big enough, are probably each 605, each number is probably 3 feet wide by 2.5 feet. And they're 3/4 inch plywood. I got up there and I said, we're just going to take the 605. The Speedway stays. The word Speedway was up there too. And so we took those, and to this very day, as a matter of fact, I'm going to post it. I have 605 in my garage. And that's probably one of my most treasured souvenirs that I have. And Joe Nava said, you really have that sign? I said, yeah, I do. And he offered me the body off from one of Rusty Wallace's Cup cars. When he was associated with, I believe it was Pontiac, he got one of Rusty Wallace's Cup car bodies. And he said, I'll trade you the 605 for the Rusty Wallace car. And I said, let me think about it. And then I decided to pass.
You should have
those
just
numbers mean a
painted
lot
some
to me.
up and sent him some bogus ones. Right?
Go to Home Depot, get some 3/4 inch plywood, paint them
Some
up red, white, and blue.
I mean, you're a wood shop Photoshop teacher. I'm sure you could
Yes.
come up with something. You
I
know,
could have come up with something, but I
Yeah.
respect Joe, so I wasn't going to pull the wool over his eyes that way.
There might have been some Jack and Coke or just some straight Jack involved in that conversation that night too. Maybe.
Well, in the suites up there at Irwindale, you get treated very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you raced at Speedway 605 for a couple of years. It closed, and then what did you do then?
Then I went to Orange Show.
Were you in college yet, or out of college, or doing the same thing?
I was let's see, 76, 78. I had graduated from Cal State Long Beach with a BA degree in 1978. So I graduated college there, and I started substitute teaching first. And so I was in the teaching profession at that time, but as a substitute teacher. And when I started racing at Orange Show Speedway, I went to Orange Show in 1981. At the very end of 81, there was a couple of cars on for sale, and I bought a 1966 Chevelle from a guy named Ron Quintana, who lived in Grand Terrace. And I raced it in, I think, 2 races at the end of 81, and ran the B main. The first race I got in, I don't remember what happened. Second race, I won the B main. And but when I bought the car, once again, I didn't have a trailer. So he loaned me a trailer, and he loaned me this single axle trailer, which was barely longer than the Chevelle. And going from Grand Terrace, where I picked up the trailer, to Orange Show is maybe a 20-minute drive. And let me tell you, it was an e-ticket ride. That trailer was changing lanes way more than my truck was. It was an experience.
So speaking of e-ticket ride, Greg, I may or may not have been privy to this one already, but where'd you work in college?
Oh, when I was in college?
Yeah, what'd you do? How'd you get through college? Where'd you work?
Well, I had a couple of part-time jobs. I worked at a gas station for a while, and I worked at actually I worked at Disneyland too.
Disneyland.
Yeah.
What'd you do? Disneyland.
Yeah.
What'd you do at Disneyland?
Well, I had multiple talents. I worked Autopia. I ran Space Mountain. America
Space
Sings
Mountain's a
was
big boy ride. That's an e-ticket.
And I was a submarine pilot for 6 years.
That was like a B ticket. Right?
Not the way I drove it. You probably heard the submarine stories.
No. What do you think the submarine ride was? It an A, B? It wasn't an E.
It was an E.
The submarine ride was an
when
E?
they had the ticket books, it was an e-ticket ride.
Bullshit. You're just trying to make yourself look good. Like you had to have
No!
special training to run the e-rides.
I still have a ticket book, and if I had it right here, I'd flip it up. It's a green one, e-ticket submarine ride. When I drove,
off. I would have not spent an e-ticket because you only got like 4 of them in a book with admission, the e-tickets.
Yeah, I think you got 4. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Matterhorn, Space Mountain, and subs. I think those were the e-ticket ride.
The Little Mermaid sub was the e-ticket. That's like
It
a rip
wasn't the Little Mermaid at the time.
what what was it?
I actually honed some of my stock car racing skills there at Disneyland in the sub.
Atopia?
No, in the sub.
It's on
Because
a rail, Greg. It's like
it's on a
fake.
rail. It's on a rail, but I got to tell, I'll shorten the story up. When you're driving around, it's a 12-minute lap in the sub, and they're 60 feet long. It gets kind of boring. So I would
12. That was your qualifying time at Saugus. You're mixing them up.
I would take a stock car magazine and I'd read it while I was driving the sub.
12 minutes at a time.
Huh?
12 minutes at a time.
Well, not all the time. But as you go through the waterfalls in the entrance, there's a green light and a red light. If the light's red, you don't take your sub through the waterfalls because there's another sub right behind it. Well, as I'm going around the outer lagoon, I'm already starting to read my magazine, and I look up and there's a sub sitting in front of me, red light, and he's parked. And you don't stop a 60-foot sub, on a dime. And I'm full reverse, and wham, I got him, and I shoved him right through the waterfalls. So
shut up. Like you really control that? Do they still control
only
it
the
today?
speed? Only the speed.
Even today?
I don't know about today.
I didn't even know someone drove them.
They're electric. See, they're electric today. When I was driving them,
California.
it was a diesel motor driving an electric motor.
Oh, that's too many emissions. So what happened? So you rear end this guy, you hit him in the X, right under the waterfall, and
yeah.
And did you sink the sub or what?
No, I didn't sink the sub. I knocked a few people out of their seats, but no, I did not sink the sub.
So is that like a verbal warning, a write-up, a suspension, go take a drug test? Like, what do they do?
I got away with that one. I came back and my working lead was there on the dock, and he goes, "Dude, what were you doing?" And I said, "I didn't see him." And he said, "And I didn't get you get a verbal, a written, or a suspension." And I got the verbal. So I was
told him you had a disruptive guest on board or something, right? They were trying to rush the cockpit, right?
Exactly.
Is that the only time you ever got in trouble at Disneyland? They kick you off the sub right after that?
No, they left me on. And so again, I'll shorten this one up too. I know we're supposed to be talking about racing, but
this is better than racing.
Once
you go through the falls, you're in what's called the inner lagoon, and you're in the dark, and I'm obviously above water, so I can see where the sea monster is and the mermaids and all this stuff. And you've got a recorded spiel that's saying, okay, and now we're going past the moray eel, and now we're doing this, and you keep it timed speed wise. Well, I'm read my magazine. I got a little pen light in my hat so I can read the magazine, and we're going along, and I hear the recorded spiel say, "Oh, thank you very much for coming to Disneyland. I hope you enjoyed the submarine voyage," which means you're pulling into the dock. So I reach up and pop the front and rear hatches. And as I do that, I hear people screaming. I look down. Well, I was way behind on the spiel, and I hadn't gone through the waterfall yet. And I popped the hatch, and I drove through the waterfall with the hatch open.
Shut up.
Yeah, I did. And there's 38 people in a boat, and they were all ankle deep in water.
It flooded the sub?
Oh yeah, I flooded the sub. And the first 8 on each side were totally drenched. And this was 1982, 83, somewhere around there. And one of the guys had a video camera up front, and it was one of the ones that's, about the size of a backpack. He had it on his shoulder like this.
Yeah.
And I soaked him. I just totally soaked him. So, and I still didn't get a reprimand on that one. I don't know why.
Did they send you to the Jungle Cruise after that, or what?
No, I was done. That's when they sent me to Autopia. Said, you go over to Autopia.
You can't screw up Autopia.
There. Oh, that was a fun ride. I enjoyed Autopia. My favorite though was Space Mountain. I enjoyed that one a lot.
We should just end the podcast right now. Those are the best stories I've heard on all my podcasts. And I thought you were such a rule follower.
But in 1989 was the first time that I met you and Garrett Cromsite, and you were driving the pink 38 car, which was a very nice looking car and fast. And like I said, I don't remember if Garrett approached me or I approached him, but we got to talking about my car, and he asked me a couple of questions, and he made some suggestions, and he said, "How much cross do you have in it?" And I had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, "Well, let's jack it up." He jacks it up and he shoves a whole bunch of spacers. I was using water pump pulleys for spacers under a coil spring car. He said, "How many you got?" He put as many spacers in there as he could. And this will come as no surprise to any other fan who watches, who's been races at Saugus Speedway. He said, "Do you have a ball peen hammer?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, here, I'm going to adjust the brakes." And he rolled underneath the car and pounded the back brake lines shut all the way across. And I said, "What's this for?" He goes, "Trust me," he says, "it'll work." And I said, "Okay." And I knew he was your crew chief at the time and your car was fast. So I said, "Okay." And that night was my very first career top 5 finish. I started about 10th and somewhere around there. And I ended up finishing 4th. Actually, I would have been 3rd. And I remember this very vividly. You passed me with 2 laps to go. You finished 3rd. I finished 4th, and I was elated, absolutely thrilled. That was my first time.
And I didn't even touch you that time, did I?
Right around me.
Right around you on the outside.
Right on by. Right on by. But that started a relationship with both you and Garrett that has lasted to this day, and it's extremely, solid, and
a few beers
I cherish
later,
that friendship with both of you very, very much.
You give me all teary-eyed. Knowing the kind of guy you are, I can only imagine the anxiety that you felt when he was smashing your rear brake lines.
It took everything I had to not just say, "Stop, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And I swear, the only reason I didn't is I knew he worked on your car. I didn't know what he did to your car, but I knew it was fast. You were in the dash consistently, and Horst and Beckers, and there was people that were really fast, but you were always in that group. So I thought, okay, but I didn't even think about how it would change the handling of the car. All I knew is I was able to go in deeper, and I wasn't getting any wheel hop, and it was actually more controllable. And to this day, Garrett has given chassis advice and setup advice to a lot of people, and some take it, some don't. The ones that a good friend of mine has a term for people like that. He calls them ask holes, where you go and you ask a question and you go, "Yeah, okay," and you walk away and you just dismiss it, or not even try it. And so I tried what he suggested, and from that point on, I kept listening to him, and I took everything that he said at his word. And that's one of the reasons that it cemented our relationship, is because Garrett knew that if he asked me to try something, I would do it. And I kind of compare the two of you. You were kind of like my driving coach, and he was my chassis guy, because you taught me a lot of strategies on driving in traffic and getting around people. I have videos of you with sound and saying, no, don't drag race them. Okay, try and get them coming off and stuff like that. And so I learned a lot about my driving strategies from you, but a lot of chassis stuff from Garrett.
Yeah, Saugus, that those years in hobby stocks and everything, even I think in super lates, it was a total invert every week, fast car. And I that particular year, I think we set fast time 11 out of 13 races or something. So we started the back of the main event every single freaking night, right? And you had 25 laps to get through 32 cars or whatever. And I remember they had no outside groove, and they put some spray on the outside, and then they put cones on the stripes, and people wouldn't even go out and practice. And we'd be like, we better go practice, because we gotta come around the outside, and it's funny because I remember it was like 92. I wrecked my car in the 8, and Steve Reynolds' dad called me during the week, and he said, "Hey, I know you're up in points. You're welcome to drive Steve's Nova. He's not driving it." And it was beautiful, and
Yellow number 83.
Yeah. And I had never driven a leaf spring car at that point. I think my first hobby stock was a rear steer Nova, but it was, and so we went to his house, and his Mr. Reynolds was an engineer of some kind. And I think Steve was just a supermodel. Who knows? Like, he was a good looking kid. But so Cromside and I remember they rolled it out in the driveway, and freaking Garrett jumps underneath it with a hammer, and Mr. Reynolds was like, whoa, what are you doing? That's like, those are titanium aircraft lines or something,
Not anymore.
Yeah. But that was a good car. I remember I went out and like set fast time in the oval and the 8, but the difference in how that leaf spring car handled in the 8 was, was incredible. So, so Saugus, great times. And did you ever run figure eights?
Yeah, I did. And I forget who you were talking with about promotion, but Ray Wilkins had it pegged where if you want to run for the championship, oval and figure 8 points combined.
Yeah.
And I was good in the oval. I was not so good in the figure 8. I hated the figure 8.
Yeah.
But my car was fast, and I'd qualify for the dash, and I'd go out and 4 cars, 4 laps. Yeah, run the dash. No problem. But I had to go get points in the 8. And my mom and dad were wonderfully supportive and always were in the stands at Saugus, at Willow Springs, at Irwindale, always there. But when the 8 rolled out on the track, my dad would go down and get a beer. I knew how many beers my dad would have each night, depending on how many figure 8 races there were, because he would go down for every figure 8 race. So I'd roll out and know that I'm going to go as far as I can. And sometimes if I'd set fast time and they, have it straight up, I'd be on the front. So I'd take off and I'd go and go and go. Usually that lasts 4 laps, maybe 5 if I was lucky. And then I would head for the backstretch. And I didn't want you couldn't pull off the track because the exit, it's coming right in turn 1 for the 8.
Right.
And so I'd head for the backstretch.
Guys would pull
and
between the straight.
I would go like this, and I'd back up to the wall so I could watch the race.
Yeah.
And people were throwing Cokes and cups with ice and get out there, you chicken shit, run. And I could hear them, my helmet on and everything, but I could hear them. They hated having me out there. So
now I heard from some people that sat back there that like that.
I matter of fact, when Garrett, he or you also, you'd come in and eventually you'd change tires and maybe even put a spacer in a spring or something like that. And so Danny, who was my crew chief at the time, and his dad Don, we wouldn't change springs, we would change tires, put a bigger tire on the left front, stuff like that. And Scotty Rourke and Jim Lightholt, who were helping Garrett at the time, he'd say, "Hey, look, Benner's putting his parking tires on."
I remember somebody told me that, I don't remember who it was, but they were like, that 26 car backs into the wall, and like he has a drink and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a Tupperware bowl with some cookies in it, and he just freaking sits there like he's at the drive-in or whatever, right?
But at least I'd back in so I could watch the rest of the figure 8. It was a great seat for the figure 8 race.
You backed in in case one of us came wide off the corner, right? We'd clip you,
So figure 8 was not my strong suit.
Did they have combined points for street stock too? Oval and 8?
Yes,
and so because I know you did well in those championship runs there.
Yes.
Did you just decide to run the 8s a little stronger at that point? Or?
I did decide to run the 8s a little stronger. Again, they didn't have the field that you guys had in pro stocks, so you could kind of say, is it a fair comparison? It's but for me, it was a good competitive area. And at Saugus, the highest I finished in points was 3rd in points. I came 2 points away from 2nd one year. I think it was 94. did really well. I won 4 main events that year. Actually, set in 94 was it? 95. Cromsite and I were the only two that set fast time, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's when he was running the Nova in street stock, and then had a car for pro stock also.
So you were the only legal car that said fast time?
Well, I still had the brake lines pounded shut, so
Well,
I won't say fully legal. But
now, were you buddies? Were you friends with him? Because isn't he kind of arrogant?
Well, we had that discussion. I think it was in North Wilkesboro, and
About 4 hours in traffic.
And he put it this way: he's very convincing in his ways and has a hard time seeing other people's point of view. But I have total faith in him. But as you said, when he's at the racetrack, he's not going to win Mr. Congeniality.
No. Why is it with 3 race car drivers on the way to North Wilkesboro, we couldn't find the freaking track like 100 times? Right. Holiday is screaming at us on the cell phone. It's right effing here. It's right effing here. And we're like, we don't see it. Where is it?
Let's see. We have how many championships have you won? 2, 3, 4, something like that. Championship driver in the driver's seat, prom site, riding shotgun, me in the back. And I told Kim this story.
2 iPhones and an Android.
Hornaday, who is a multi-time Hall of Famer, or he's a Hall of Fame, NASCAR Hall of Famer, and he's trying to talk us through there. And what happens? We drive off there. He goes, make a right. Rick makes a right. No, that's not a street. That's a driveway. No, turn here. And we were literally going around somebody's backyard in the grass. And
I thought we were going to get shot.
I thought we were too, because
we were in in his yard.
You hear the banjo theme going off in the background. There wasn't a lot of people out there.
It was pitch black. And I remember you saying, dude, I think we're driving, Rick, you're driving around his house. You're in his grass. You're in his yard. And we're in like a rental van or something.
And you can hear Hornaday on the radio, on the
you can see our headlights.
I can see your headlights. Dude, you're in somebody's yard. No, you're going the wrong way.
Yeah. That was good times, that
right was a there. Fantastic trip.
So it really, on that trip too, we went to that museum, and Bodine got us into that museum, and it was closed. We were the only, it was me, you, and Garrett, and that was the first time I ever really realized what a student of the sport you were, and was like, Benner, like, a lot about freaking racing. And the other thing I remember is Logano got us that tour at Penske, and all the normal people were up in the balcony, and we were down on the on the
where
floor.
The surface plates were,
and that little girl was being all polite, and then she finally realized we were just goofballs, and a couple times she had to tell us to get away from the cars a little bit, like
Garrett so much wanted to take pictures of those chassis.
Oh yeah. And she's like, you can't have your camera out, get away from the car. But there was, I don't remember really what happened, but there was a truck in the corner, and the girl the girl that was giving us the tour, Logano's girl, didn't really know what the truck was. And you walked away from the cars to the truck that was parked inside their shop.
Yes.
And
I remember that. I remember that vividly, because Roger Penske and Mark Donohue were like this. They made an incredible team. And when I saw that truck, it was one of the first enclosed haulers that was ever out there. And Mark Donohue designed it and hand built that thing to take his Can-Am car to the road races. Mark Donohue was my very first all-time racing hero. I really admired him. He he graduated from Brown University in Pennsylvania, and with a degree in engineering, mechanical engineering. And he's one of the first drivers that really had a mind for not just throwing springs at it and things like that, but measuring cross weight and measuring the wire diameters of the springs and things of that sort, and developed cars through testing and engineering principles that he had learned. When he hooked up with Roger Penske, who is the ultimate immaculate preparer of race cars,
The Penske way.
Yeah, the Penske way. Well, the girl said when she was giving us the tour, said there's clean and then there's Penske clean.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. And
I remember that when we went to their paint and lettering shop, she still said that there's some tracks and some cars that Penske prefers to have hand painted, the numbers and the letters and stuff, which was surprising.
Yes,
he's one of the guys that those cars never, like, he knows how to do numbers and everything. But now that you say that, those cars are always very clean, Logano's and
yes.
Blaney's, and
they are.
So back to the
yeah.
truck. So you recognize that truck.
I did.
And you got yelled at because you got off the dotted line and you're like walking over to the truck.
Yep, that is true. That is very true. And but like I said, Mark Donahue's cars were almost always sponsored by Sunoco. The color scheme was a deep blue with yellow trim, black numbers. His numbers were always ended in a 6. His Trans Am car was number 6. His Indy car was 66. His Formula One car was 26, which was one of the reasons I went with 26. My birthday's on the 26th, and Mark Donahue's F1 car was 26. And so I thought the two matched together. He won one NASCAR race. It was in of all cars, a AMC Matador.
Dude, those were wicked cars, though.
Oh, God. About as aerodynamic as a brick, but he has one NASCAR win to his name, and it was in AMC Matador. Bobby Allison actually took over that car later on in AMC's history.
Didn't we see that car at the Darlington Hall of Fame when we went there?
Yes, we did.
And you knew the whole freaking story about that, but
yeah,
you didn't know the crackhead girl that gave us a ride in the golf cart, though.
No, I did not know her.
Get to the museum,
at all.
Right?
Even Todd Bodine was surprised because I knew Jeff Bodine, his older brother, Jeff Bodine, had driven the 99 car when he was driving, modifieds in the Northeast and things of that sort. And Todd even turned his head and said, "Wow, you know about this stuff?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I do study it. I really do, and I still do to this day." Yeah, they're very.
Didn't Donahue get caught cheating one time with 2 different cars or something? Like, what was it? Do you know that story?
I know exactly the story you're talking about, and I thought it was very interesting. As a matter of fact, like I said, I'd read the book, and there was 2 Trans Am cars. They ran in 67, 68, and 69. They ran the Sunoco Camaros, and they were number 6 and 9. And at the time, the pits were not like they are now in front of the flag stand and God and everybody, but they were kind of like Riverside, where you'd be out, away from the main things that were going on. Well, they built a very lightweight car with O2 thin tubing, and they'd acid dipped the roof, and they put a vinyl top on it because they said the roof flapped too much when it was going down the straightaway. So they put a vinyl roof on it so it wouldn't flap so much. It was so thin. And they'd have 2 drivers. Ronnie Bucknam drove the 9, and Mark Donohue drove the 6, which is the primary car. And they realized nobody's really looking. After you go through your qualifying lap, nobody's really looking. This is a road course. Say like Riverside is 2.5 miles long. And so they just split their time, and Mark would go out first and set fast time in the 6 car, come back in, and their numbers were always in a white circle. Well, they had magnetic circles, and they would take the 6 off and put it over the 9 and trade numbers, and then then Ronnie Bucknam would get in the same car that Donohue just qualified in, and he'd go out and set second fast time. So both cars were always on the front row because the lightweight got qualified twice by 2 different drivers.
That's crazy. That's crom site. That's crom site shit right there at the.
That's why I gave him the book. I said, "You got to read this, dude. You got to read this book. There's stuff in here that even you will be impressed with."
So Mesa Marin too. Like I never knew that you raced at Speedway 605 until late in our relationship, and
Mhm.
I always thought you were so much better at Mesa. I think you were probably the best Saugus street stock type driver at Mesa Marin, and it makes sense because you were comfortable from 605. Now I will say that you were the best Saugus guy, the guy that got the transition fastest to go to Irwindale on the half mile. And it's all because you already had that half mile experience, I guess.
That's true. Mesa Marin, I was say 70% comfortable. I will admit the banking there after coming from Saga Speedway was very intimidating.
Yeah.
But I did do pretty well there. I enjoyed that track a lot, especially the October race where so many cars would come up from El Cajon and Orange Show and Saugus and
Down from
all of
Lakeport.
that.
Those were beautiful cars.
Irwindale, when we went to Irwindale, they started us out on the 3rd mile on the inside, and we were actually running on Friday nights in 1999. And then halfway through the season, decided we're going to go to the half mile. And I thought that it would be that I would be intimidated like I was with the bankings at Mesa Marin, but it came around to me pretty quickly. I felt pretty comfortable on the half mile. Learned that just because the track starts to curve in, it doesn't mean you have to lift. You just keep going and going, and eventually you find the point where you do have to lift. And I seem to get a hold of that, fairly quickly. I enjoyed the half mile at Irwindale a lot. I really did. And when we first started, as you well know, in say 2000, the next year, they'd run a B main to get street stocks or super stocks, they were calling them. They'd run a B main. There was say 32, 34, 36 cars that were showing up, and that was really fun. The year that it was 2003 that I came actually close to winning the championship. I finished 2nd in points, won a main event, set a couple of fast times, and I was really close. Lee Ladd won the championship that year, and again, no slam against Lee Ladd, but I was outclassed in equipment. His cars were being prepared by the Spanglers. He had a very healthy budget, as we all know.
No, he wasn't. He was. I think he was on
and
food stamps or WIC, California WIP program, or Food Fresh Start or something. He didn't have. He was barely getting by. He was living paycheck to paycheck.
This is Lee Ladd, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, the Ladco guy.
Yeah. So even though I didn't win the championship, I felt very good about our results in 2003.
Yeah, sometimes you're just outclassed, and Tony took such good care of all of us for a long time, and he's just a warm dude, right? Like he's like a guy that he's a hugger, right? He's just always mellow, warm. I remember we built, I don't know if you were with me or not, but we built a pure stock car for him in like 24 hours.
Really?
Yeah. At my buddy Gary's shop. Rayburn and I were just talking about it last week. And then he was so mellow and everything. Well, there was some kind of a race at Irwindale where there were some celebrities there or something, and Tony was helping to put it on. And Gary Busey was pitting next to Tony and me, and so I don't remember what happened, dude, but all I remember is little mellow Tony was like shoving me to the side, going after Gary Busey, like he was going to kill Gary Busey. And I kind of just caught the edge of it, like, whoa, what's going on? And I grab him, and he's like, and I'm going to have to ask him, but I think Busey said either insinuated that Tony was like just the help, like a Hollywood guy would, or he said something to Tony's wife or something. But dude, I have never seen, he was pissed. He was, and that whole night he's like, I'm just going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. we have a lot more stories that we can't even tell because somebody will get in trouble and stuff. And uh, Cromside built you a car once at his cabin. So people don't know the commutes you guys were making to race were incredible. I mean, I lived right by Saga Speedway. I mean, you if it rained out, you came and sat in my jacuzzi, and we were home
Yep.
and up at my house in 5 minutes. And Cromsite was commuting from the top of Pine Mountain Club, and you were commuting from,
Whittier.
605
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
And so I remember one year you commissioned Cromsite to build you the world's most badass car, and he was doing it at his house in Pine Mountain Club.
Correct.
How many times did you see that car before you guys rolled it off the trailer in at Irwindale?
Well, the first time I saw it, the very first time I saw it complete, it was a framing cage sitting on the ground. That's it. No suspension, no engine, no interior, nothing. That was the first time I saw it. And
did you have any concerns then, or did your anxiety?
I did have concerns then. I walked in and Garrett knew it because he saw it in my face.
On a scale of 1 to 10, the first time you saw it, where was your anxiety?
It was clicking the 9 mark.
Okay. All right.
Because it looked so small.
It's a metric car.
Huh? Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not going to pass that all off on a metric car. It was small. And that's when I first questioned it. And again, I remember I called Brian Kelly when I had asked Garrett if he'd build me a car. And I asked Brian, I said, what do you think? Leaf spring car, coil spring car, leaf spring, coil spring. What do you think? And he said, who's building the car? And I said, Cromsite's building the car. And he goes, let me tell you this.
No brainer.
He goes, Garrett's worst car is going to be better than 95% of everybody else's best car. So he goes, whatever you get, it's going to be fast.
And he didn't have a garage. He had a cabin on the side of a mountain, and he
Correct.
just walled off under the deck.
Yep. And in order to, it was in the winter when I was there doing most of the help with him, and he would turn on the dryer with the vent coming in so it would be warmer. And one of his daughters would fix us dinner and bring it out to us and everything. The girls were really sweet.
And did the bear ever like sniff around? I was there.
No, we kept the garage door closed.
I was there once before he had the garage door, and there was an apple tree, and we heard some noise, and there was a bear. Like, we're like, this is just stupid.
So we finished the car, had it powder coated and everything, and it was beautiful. It was really just really, really nice. And this was the year Irwindale opened in 1999.
Who was the tech guy?
Say again? I'm sorry, I missed it. I talked through it.
Who was the tech guy?
That would be Jeff Schrader.
And Cromsite, describe the relationship between Cromsite and Schrader.
Well, as far as seeing eye to eye is concerned, see, here's Garrett Cromsite and here's Jeff Schrader.
Right.
But there. And we went to Irwindale before it was open in the spring of 99 to test. And they wanted one street stock, one late model, one of every flavor. And so Garrett and I took the car. And
did you tell him it was a street stock or a super late model or a modified?
We told it was a street stock. So what division are you going to run this thing in? He says, street stock. And he goes, well, he says, I got some concerns. And so we actually had him over to my house in Whittier. It was me, Garrett, and Jeff. And he went through a laundry list of things that he didn't like about it. Had we talked about it, we might have been able to make some concessions, or Jeff could have made some concessions, I was driving the car. Garrett wasn't driving the car, but he still, he made no concessions. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. None of the things that we did were against any rule that was in the rule book.
And so that car never hit the track after that, huh?
Never saw Irwindale. Saying it was a disappointing situation is an understatement.
Yeah.
It took a lot of wind out of both Garrett's and my sails.
Yeah.
It really did. And
I don't know. I wonder what happened
left
to
a
that
bad
car.
taste in our mouth.
Wonder what happened to that car.
Garrett ran it for a while.
Is it the Black
At Willow
5
Springs.
car?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
He ran
I
it at
think
Willow Springs.
Kraft's kid ended up with it, I think, at Havasu, and then
Mhm.
Now I got a car from you that I didn't even know came from you through to me. That guy that was a sheriff. Anyway, that metric Malibu car. We didn't know this till
just recently.
At North Wilkesboro. We're sitting around at like 2 a.m. eating peanut M&Ms and whatever else, because there were no restaurants open. And you were talking about that car, and we figured out that it went from you to Kraft, back down to the guy by you, and then it ended up coming to me. I bought it
and then sold it to you. Yeah.
That was the one I wrecked in the 8, the blue 38 car.
That photograph is still amazing to me. That one where the steam's coming out and everything.
Yeah.
And I only
did you see my nutsack flying out the window too? Like has never been the same. I'm going to tell you that right now. They're still swollen. So look, Benner, I know it's way past your bedtime. You probably have to brush your teeth and put your retainer in or something, and go get a cookie. Right. All right. Well, it was good times, and
there's a lot of good stories to be told. I appreciate the fact, Rick, that you have developed a podcast called Short Track Stories, because as you said about some people where they think it's not that interesting because I've lived it, or you've lived it, or Duke Hohenschel has lived it, or something of that sort. They're really interesting stories. And Kim and I, just before dinner, were kind of reminiscing about some of the days at Saugus. And I've raced at a lot of tracks, but I probably have the best memories from Saugus Speedway because of the characters, the people, the personalities, Monty, Ray Wilkins, Mike Branham. There was all kinds of characters out
Deborah
there.
Grizzaffi, I sat in gum. I mean, there's always something somewhere, right? There's always some inside joke somewhere.
Yeah, there's always
to this
something
day,
to smile about.
Yeah, to this day, we still have it. But
yes.
All right, well, let's call it a night, and I'll give you a call tomorrow. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Greg Benner, superstar. Love you too, man. See you later.
Take care.
Bye.